My name is Susie Pappas, and today is May 28th, 2019. I'm interviewing Penny Blumenstein at the Max M. Fisher Federation Building in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. This interview is being recorded as part of the Women in Leadership Oral History Project. Do you give permission to the Leonard and Simons Jewish Community Archives to publish, duplicate, or otherwise use this recording for educational purposes and for use as deemed appropriate by the archives?
I do.
The Women's Philanthropy Department has had several names throughout its history. For the purposes of this interview, the questions will refer to it by its current name, Women's Philanthropy, but feel free to use whatever name you're comfortable with. Okay, Penny, when and where were you born?
I was born in Detroit. You want me to give the date? I will. No, but Detroit. I was born in Detroit at Harper Hospital.
And where did your family live at the time?
At that time, they lived on Pasadena in the Dexter Davison neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived there until I was 9.
And then where did you go?
And then we moved to Sherwood Forest,
Mm-hmm.
7 Mile in Livernois area. So I kind of changed schools a lot.
So tell me the schools that you went to.
Okay, so I started off, I was at McCullough.
Mm-hmm.
Went to McCullough kindergarten through the 2nd grade. I moved when I was in the 3rd grade, and I went to Hampton. And I went to Hampton until I was in the 6th grade. But then they changed the lines of the district.
Uh-huh.
So anybody who wasn't graduating that year had to move, and I ended up going to Pasture for actually the 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And then I went to Mumford after that.
Mumford, right. So do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister.
And how does
I'm the second in line. So I had a brother, an older brother, a younger brother, and an even younger sister.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And how was religion observed in your house when you were growing up?
My father was very active in the community, as was my mother. So both of them were active. And we belonged to Shared Tzedek, so we were very traditional. I can't say that we were a really, really observant family, but we had Shabbat every Friday.
Oh.
And with the rule that as we got older, you had to come to the table without curlers in your hair. You could go out, but
Yeah.
you couldn't look like you were getting ready to go out.
That's funny.
We certainly celebrated the major holidays, and my father, I would have to say that my father was a little more observant in his shul practice than my mother.
Mm-hmm.
But we did have every holiday. My mother was a very warm, welcoming person, so she always included people, and the family came together for every major holiday.
So what were your parents' names?
My father's name was Gerson Bernstein, and my mother was Lee Bernstein. My mother actually came from Cleveland, but established she as a bride, and she established a great relationship with my father's family, and her family continued to come back and forth because, truthfully, it wasn't that far.
No.
And we went back and forth, and so we had very good family relations, and it worked out that I have wonderful aunts. 2 of my aunts are still alive. One is 100 and one is 95.
Amazing.
Almost 96, and they are dynamos. I'm hoping for all those genes.
So, did you have a bat mitzvah?
No, Shared Tzedek did not have bat mitzvahs then.
They
No.
didn't. They didn't.
I was consecrated.
Right.
Yes, no. Shared Tzedek was late to the table there. They didn't have bat mitzvahs.
But did you continue
Neither did
with,
my daughter.
Your daughter didn't either.
No, because they still didn't.
So did you continue with was there a Hebrew high school? Did you go?
Yeah, well, I went until I was almost 16, so yes. I didn't continue after my consecration, but it did keep me there a little longer.
So would you say that philanthropy was important to your family when you were growing up? And if so, how did you know that?
It was very important. My father was, as you say, extremely active in a larger framework of working for community organizations, working for the synagogue, doing all kinds of things that really put him out in the place where most things are going on. He worked for a lot of different. He was very active at JVS, and in other organizations. So you could always see it. My mother was active in Hadassah. She also became very active in the March of Dimes because my sister at age 5 had polio, and so she started marching every year for the March of Dimes. And one or 2 years when she didn't happen to be here when the march was going on, I marched. Wow. So it was an early indoctrination into doing your part. It was just what was part of our home. My grandparents were very much, not that I'm not even talking about wealth, I'm just talking about participation and having the ability. My grandmother was very active in the Denver home, which became this huge asthma hospital, because my aunt had asthma,
Wow, right.
and so long ago, and so she always was raising money aside from all the other things for the Denver hospital, that's what it was called at that time.
So you definitely grew up surrounded by
yes.
philanthropy. So when you were in high school, did you do any Jewish youth groups? Did they?
Yes. Well, yeah. It was it was a Jewish Center group. It was not like BBYO, but we had a club. But the club had a more adult leader, and it all was centered around the center, because in those days. Not that there weren't BBYOs and there were all those, everything was there, you just had to join. But if you wanted to have a girls group, they didn't want you to just, it wasn't like a sorority where you just sort of went off, and you did have an organization. And so that was really centered at the Jewish Center, which was on Woodward, a long way away.
Okay. So when did you first become involved with the Federation?
I cannot tell you the year. The first thing I knew about Federation was when I was married, very young, and somebody rang my doorbell and asked for money, and I didn't know what to do. Was it $1? Was it $5? Really and truly, it was really. It was a surprise to me.
Is this when you were first married?
Yes.
Okay.
And I had already been involved in a few things because my aunt, who was in Hadassah, had taken me to several Hadassah meetings. But this was like coming to me for money. That was a really uncomfortable thing. I had no idea that people.
So how did you handle that?
I can't remember exactly that, but I gave her something, and when I shut I was literally like shaking. And when my husband came home, I said to him, I really didn't know what to do. And he said, well, you could have given the money. And I said, well, I did, but I didn't know if it was the right amount. I felt so unsure. But it did kind of wake me up. And I was part of an ORT chapter in those years. I don't know how they do it today or if they do it at all, but there was, Women's ORT used to go, and they would have sort of a neighborhood group of people. And one of my friends said, we're going to start one here, and somehow all of a sudden we got this group together.
Which group was it? Do you
Fairview, it was
Fairview
called.
ORT, right. They would have different chapters.
Yes.
Chapters.
Right. And we did things. It wasn't just about raising money. It was also, we had programming. We had projects. It was very low key and very easy, and there were several women who were really very strong leaders, so that was good.
Well, were you one of those leaders in that group?
This was the thing. Do you remember Josie Keene?
No, I
No,
don't.
you probably don't. Do you
No.
know Diane Keene?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, Josie was married to her husband first,
Okay.
long ago.
Right.
Anyway, she was one of our leaders, and we had others, but I would do things, like first I was the treasurer, and then I was the program person, and I said I would do any job they wanted, I just didn't want to be president. That was my mantra, no, anything but being president. And I wasn't. And I remember the first program that I had to introduce the speaker, and I was so nervous. I never heard one word I said. My heart was pounding in my ears, and people said, "Oh, you spoke so beautifully." I said, "Really? You're flabbergasted. Are you kidding? I just got through this with my life." But these are things. I just overcame that eventually, but I also overcame the fear about asking for money and giving money.
So how did that come about?
Because Dulcie Rosenfeld took me into the leadership program. She mentored me through that, and it was a wonderful program. It was a very serious program.
Tell us about that program.
That program was I can't remember exactly how many weeks, but it was a number of weeks, and that program was very intense. I mean, you learned about every phase of what things you would be talking about what you would be doing, and it really also, was giving you some leadership skills as you went along. It was my first experience with a kind of leadership training program, and it was very informative and gave you a lot more confidence.
So do you remember what year you might have done that?
I don't have a clue.
Okay. Well, it was probably 40 years ago at least.
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure it was 40 years ago.
Well, maybe.
That's kind of scary, isn't it, when you say that?
Well,
oh, yeah, it was 40 years
I
ago.
know, but so
Yeah.
probably
It was probably 40
probably
years ago.
like in the 70s sometime.
Oh,
then.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it might have even been in the 60s.
It's hard to know. I took it as well, but I did it in 77, so.
Yeah, no, it was really early on.
Okay.
And
so what came out of that?
what came out of that is, then you're identified, and they ask you to work, and you start to work, and you make some calls, you start doing some programming.
Because in those days, Women's Department or Women's
Department then.
It was really Women's Division.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
You are so right.
I know.
It was Women's Division.
I know.
You are so right.
And in those
Thank you.
days, there were two tracks. There was the fundraising track and the education track. So were you on one side more than the other? Do you remember?
Both.
Okay. Do you
I
remember?
don't know why it was both, but it was.
Well, that's how they did it. They did it.
I did both.
Yeah, they did that because they wanted people to feel comfortable on both sides of the aisle, so to speak.
Right.
So do you remember certain programs that you might have chaired in those days?
Well, I remember doing one at the center that was on Davison.
Myers and
Myers,
Curtis.
Myers, yeah. And that one we did where we had rooms. We kind of created a little Israel, and different aspects
Yeah,
of
I
Israel.
remember.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, and everybody really, and there was like a shuk and all of that.
Yeah,
It was like it was
right.
fun. It was
It was a lot of work doing these programs, but it was fun, and there was a lot of camaraderie, and I made so many friends. It was such a wonderful experience. Look, one of my dearest friends today is Nancy Grossfeld. I would never have known her maybe I would have, but never in that way if I hadn't met her through some Federation activity.
Well, she said the same thing about you.
Yeah.
So, do you remember, well, you mentioned Dulcie Rosenfeld. Were there other leaders that you remember when you first began?
Edith Jacquier, Tilly Brandwine. Oh gosh, we were so lucky. We had some of the most incredible women. And I always say that if times had been different, any one of those women should have been the president at one time or another of the Federation, because they were so competent and so devoted and focused. They had it all. They really did. It was just, as you say, it was women's division. What was women's division? Nothing but another part of the campaign. We were like secondary. No, not even secondary. That's way too high. We were just out there somewhere, just a division. And we got to a point where we did start to fight for our place.
Well, do you remember when they changed the name to Women's Department? I remember that was right around, it was right, because I remember it was Linda Klein when we did that, and she came right after you. Yeah, and that was kind of like, now we were a department.
How about the lion?
Well, for sure, that line of, that was when they brought that. Okay, so was your husband involved in Federation?
Yes, actually. Actually, it was very surprising. Harold's not much of an organizational person. Give him something to do, he's going to take care of it and whatever. But Harold got very enthused. It was during the time of the '67 war. And they had a meeting at United Hebrew Schools, and he was there, and people were raising money. And he came home and he said to me, I gave them $5,000. I pledged $5,000. I said, Harold, where are we going to get $5,000? You know, like, are you kidding? And he said, we'll find a way, we'll get it. And he just, because it was one of the, not just the war itself, what was going on, the need of the moment, but the way other leadership people came out and came together and gave untold amounts of money. And that was it for him. So then he was identified as a young leadership person. Not that we ever were part of young leadership. By then it wasn't our age, it was, we got married younger, we did all those things younger. So we kind of passed that. But we went on a young leadership mission to Israel for 2 weeks. 2 weeks in Israel.
What year?
1971. Okay? And there were people from across the whole United States, couples. We spent 2 weeks in Israel, which was a really in-depth program. It changed our lives, truthfully. It really did. It just changed our lives and focused us on those things that we knew, but we didn't feel the same way that we did when we came home. It was remarkable.
So how did your involvement affect your children? First of all, tell us about your children.
Okay. So I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And unfortunately, they all live in different places. I have one here and one in Wisconsin and one in Arizona. That's, always too bad. But I'll tell you how it affected them. There were days I wasn't there, meetings I attended where somebody else was taking care of them or they were tending to themselves. And the phone. So campaign time would come and I would say to them, I need some quiet time. You go do whatever you're going to do, but I need to be able to be on the phone without being interrupted so that I could make my calls. And they learned that was really important. And they learned why I was doing it, obviously, but they also, they respected it. And I would say that each one of them has absorbed this feeling of philanthropy from us. Some maybe more than others. I mean, there's no one like Ricky who just, he's my bonding person. But my other kids too, and in their own communities, they do things, and they think it's really important, and they
learn that from you and Harold.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So before you became president, what positions did you hold within women's philanthropy?
I chaired several divisions. Actually, I chaired the Ruby division the year that it was. They decided at the meeting. It was a $3,600 gift. And at the meeting, I'll never forget this. Diane Klein gets up and says, "We're going to this division is going to be." Maybe it was Sharon Hart. It's Sharon Hart. She said, "This division is good. Our minimum's now going to be $5,000."
So that's the Lion division. That's not the Ruby division.
Yes,
The
that was the
Lion,
I'm sorry,
right.
the Lion division.
Yes.
So I'm sitting there. I've already agreed to chair this. Now they're telling me, and I looked at her and I said, "So now I have to go home and tell my husband it's not just that I raised to $3,600. Now I have to say $5,000." Oh, that was very good.
Yeah.
That was very good. But I did.
Okay.
And of course, in the long run, we found a way.
Of course, of course. So, did you, at that time, see yourself as eventually being president of Women's? Is that something you
No.
aspired to?
No, I really didn't. I've never aspired to any of the roles. It's just not my thing. I don't sort of plan out my life or say, this is what I really want to do.
So how did it come about? So how did you first become campaign chair and then ultimately become president?
Well, that's the choice of the past presidents.
Right,
So when they come to you and they say, "We'd like you to be the associate campaign chair," it's a really big honor.
Were you surprised or just?
I don't know by that time that I would say I was surprised. I would say, okay, I've done all these other things. I've been involved for a really, really long time. And, you recognize when it's your turn.
Right.
Everybody should take their turn if they're ready and people are ready for them. So that was the natural thing.
So, do you remember some of the duties that you did, or anything that you felt that you brought to your time as being campaign chair?
Well, I don't, we have such a wonderful program here and so many wonderful people that work with you. I would say, if anything, having had my experiences of not being able to do this so easily made it easy to talk to other people about, you can overcome this. Nobody finds it like, I can hardly wait to get to the phone
Except
and start
Susie Citron.
Maybe you've got it. She can hardly wait. Well,
Yeah.
no, I don't know anyone else who
No,
does.
I don't either.
They all say, "Okay, I got to get this done. I'm just going to get started. I'm going to get started. Okay, I'll do it in an hour." And that's really and I think my ability to be relaxed and accessible. If I added anything to that, it was that. I'm also pretty well organized. So when I planned out, certain things, I was able to help in that way. If they weren't, if I didn't think we were structured in the right way, or I thought there were other things that we could do. I know that worker training became a huge plus for me. I really felt that worker training was the kind of thing that you could really help people in their ability to move forward.
I agree. I think worker training is primary. So you were campaign chair, and then you became president. And how did you view both roles, like campaign chair and then president?
That's interesting because when I became president, I said, I think I'll just be a one-year president. It isn't really what I want to do. By that time, I was so immersed in campaign, I didn't really think I wanted to be president. I told you, that was really not the thing I ever liked to do. But somehow, when I was there and I saw that I could have, let's say, direct influence on interesting programming or putting people in the right places to help them to rise, of being not only a leadership person but also someone who could help other people to that role. And you can do that a lot more in a broader sense with a lot of people. And that's where we get many of our campaign workers, is from those people who think they just want to do programming. So anyway, 1 year led to 2, and
And you enjoyed it, right?
I did. I really did.
So when you think back, first of all, who were some of the staff people that you worked with? Do you remember
Oh my
that?
goodness. Oh geez.
Well, I mean, did you have an exec that you would that?
Well, I had. Well, Sally Kruger was my exec for a while. I had so many execs during that time period.
Did you have a lot of transition going on?
A lot, and that was kind of hard. And then sometimes we would get a new person, and then you'd have to start. It was kind of like starting all over
Training
again. When I first started working with the women's division, it was, what was her name? Oh my God, this sweet lady. She ran everything. Do you remember who she was? She was a little late. She was, and
No.
she was the women's division person, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name now. You'd have
Not Lois Brown, no.
No, Lois Brown was there, but then there was this other person.
I can't remember who it was.
But anyway, and then we started evolving. All of a sudden, having.
Well, I remember Sally, but then we had Barbara Satinsky for a little bit after that. Well, okay, so
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Listen, I'm really lucky I know your name, Susie.
So Penny, since this is obviously we're talking about women, so this would be take all night if we were going to go on. I'm just going to talk about women's. So when you think back to your time, what were your proudest accomplishments? But maybe you just told me that. But do you have anything else that?
No, I will say that one of my proudest accomplishments was making it more important within the Federation that women had not only an active role, but an important role. And I, for whatever reason, had very good relationship with a lot of our men leaders. And I just felt like you cannot push these women as if they're like just an appendage. They are really the heart and soul. And I think I had a lot of influence with them, and because of that was able to have them be a greater part of the Federation as a whole. When I was campaign chair, we decided that we wanted to bring the lion to this community.
That's a big one. Tell us about that.
Whoa!
Well, tell us what that meant. Bringing the lion.
Well, there were so many communities that had the lion pin.
The lion pin.
We already had the identity.
Lion.
We already had the dollar
Division.
levels. We already had all that, but when I had the pin was something that our senior leaders did not think we needed. We've always done great. I just picture Edith Jack here saying this. We don't need that. It is not necessary in this community. This community is special, and it was. Our community always had a higher per capita fundraising than any other community. It didn't matter how much the dollars were in the total, higher per capita. And the pin was irrelevant to them. But I had heard so much, during those years we used to have UJA training. And I'll tell you, it's something that is sorely missed today because no community can do as much as these regional meetings did.
So yeah, about the regional meetings.
Okay. So I went to lots of them and learned all kinds of different skills and met the whole world of women leadership out there, which was a very valuable thing.
Yeah.
And we're really missing that.
Yeah, I agree that we are
Really
missing
that. And a lot of their training helped me do whatever else I was doing. But one of the things that they were talking about at every meeting now was, using the lion as a fundraising tool. So when I came back and talked to my little cabinet, we agreed that we should do that. But then I had to bring it to everyone, and we had these stalwarts who just, and they were, believe me, my mentors and the people I respected. But we said, you really need to consider the fact that this has been so useful. If you don't want one, you don't have to wear one. But we found it to be amazing. From the minute I started wearing my pin, people would come and say, oh, what a beautiful pin that is. Mm-hmm. And I say, yes, but you can't just buy this pin. And it was great. It was a golden opportunity.
A great fundraising.
Absolutely.
And you brought it during your campaign.
Yes, but believe me, I got a lot of backlash.
Here we are so many years later.
Right.
So I'm going to just ask you a few things about women's, and why is it important to you, or why has it been important? I think you've probably talked about that, but
I have, but I'll tell you that I really believe that philanthropy starts in the home, and philanthropy starts with a woman. And it isn't that all women are going to be philanthropic or that they are even going to be that person, but most of them are, on whatever level. And therefore, they inspire their children and they influence their husband. Now, when I was first active, most women didn't work. It was your gift that you discussed with your husband, and so you wanted to give something, but you managed to, if you were knowledgeable enough, you could instruct your husband with the things that he didn't know. Tell him what the new things were, or what the needs were, or whatever it is. You could be his resource. And so I do feel that way, and I feel that children take an example as much from their mother, if not more so, in those areas, because they see her first doing that. Mm-hmm. The father, if he's active, he's going to meetings. He's not at home or interacting with these other women or making the telephone calls.
It's true.
All right, so you set an example for your children, and you, I think in the long run, really educate your husband.
So why do you think it's important for women to have their own separate campaign?
Well, I think for our own self-image, and in some ways I know it's just a portion of what the total gift is, but I also think that that's in its own way a little bit of a fundraiser, because if the husband wants to get up and announce his gift or be in a division, even though, yes, the money can be merged, he wants to know he's giving that much, whatever that much is. Mm-hmm. And what his wife is giving is that much plus. Mm-hmm. Now, I know it doesn't always work that way, but it works that way often enough. And the thought is, well, I don't want to really take away from your gift, so I'd like to give X, and therefore the gift does get bigger. Now, I feel really fortunate because my husband says, take whatever part of our gift you want and call it yours, okay? So I do. I take a big chunk. Mm-hmm. And I know it doesn't matter, because that's the money we're going to be giving as a total at this point in life, although at every big meeting he gets up and he adds to it some way or another. But I feel really good about that, and he knows I feel good about that. And he wants me to feel that I'm really a part of this. And although today's world is a little different, and the women, the relationships, the way they do their money, I recognize all the changes. there's still that heart and that connection and that sitting down to talk about it, where the husband used to just make the gift and the woman didn't even really know, and now it's a conversation.
And do you remember they would say that the government would
They count, and that's really true.
Okay,
Do you
that there
know?
would be two gifts, not
Absolutely,
just one.
and that's true. But that would be if you gave $1 and he gave 100,000.
right.
But it was true. They were counting, and particularly then, they were counting how many people were supporting the Jewish causes, and particularly Israel.
Yeah.
And it made a big
I know,
difference.
I know. So I'm going to end with a question for you. What are your hopes for women's philanthropy in the future?
I would have to say that my hopes is that we can continue it in somewhat of the form we've had, because it draws the women in, not the women who just have the money and can just give it freely, but the women who need to be encouraged, the women who need to be involved in some way. And I think that we have a great opportunity here of bringing new people in all the time and helping them to become philanthropists.
Thank you. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say thank you, Susie, for reminding me about a few of the things that I couldn't quite remember.
Well,
so,
we
but
always
it's-
have been a
it's-
good team. So
Yes,
that's
it's
good.
great.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you.